topic of death and one's own limitedness, endliness can be a very good inquiry. I've heard of the inquiry question, what would I see if I were a newly born baby? What would my experience be? This is an inquiry question that definitely resonates and opens up many more questions. And has a lot in common with the question I haven't heard from anyone else before that just occurred to me. What would be here, or what is here, if I were dead? Just to clarify, I do not mean any of this in a nihilistic or in any way negative, sad way. None of that is even relevant. Just the idea of not existing can allow for some very interesting thoughts and processes. And I see the similarity with the questions concerning being a baby, insofar that we don't really exist yet when we were just born, when we are just born, the way we do when we're a fully developed personality. So just having entered the world is very similar to just leaving it. It had a very strong effect on me, the inquiry question. What is here if I were dead? It really allows for a space to open, which can then be investigated. How much of this experience is my thought world? How much of it is within me, and how much of it is not? There are people who very specifically state and believe the nature of reality is that it's all just a simulation, a projection from the mind. In that case, when I'm not here, nothing is. Yet people pass away, and the rest of the world does exist for us who haven't passed. So what does that mean? I don't know what it means for me. What does it mean for you? How much of all of your experience depends on you? What happens to it when you're not there? This also relates to the idea of enlightenment, awakening, realization, whatever you want to call it, also being called ego death by some people. And in a way, that's what happens when this identity is no longer the main character, when it's no longer an I perspective, an egocentric narrative, but an allocentric, very general, holistic narrative. These words are not enough because, of course, even calling it a narrative doesn't really get at it. What it's like when there is no doership, there's also no narration or listening to a narration. There is just the ground of being, the void, the Tao, fabulously dancing itself into existence for no particular reason, aside from entertaining itself. Jim Carrey nicely said, entertaining and comforting itself. So I think the gravity around the topic of death is very directly linked to emotional responses and to a certain degree of arousal state in most people, a certain type of excitation in the body. And in the mind. And this type of topic that has such a hold on you is a great way to get into inquiring about your own nature. Whenever anything sets you off in any way, be it positive or negative, that's always a great place to look. Oh, what just caused that reaction? Know thyself. And birth and death, the things all humans of all times have all had in common, not only with each other, but with most animals, and to a degree, of course, with all life. And so it's a very deeply emotional topic. The difference, of course, between birth and death, in that emotional way, is that in birth, something suddenly comes from nothing. Whereas in death, something that was there disappears. And it's that subtractive nature of just the topic of death that makes it much more difficult for our nervous systems, for our minds to deal with And it's exactly that it has in common with this awakening process. Because that is too subtractive. It's things that fall away that are important here. Gaining something, even if it's a stressful thing, the additive quality of something happening, something being there when before it wasn't, is something that is much easier for us to deal with because we know what it is we're dealing with, because it's a thing. Something at least we consider a thing. And I'm not just talking about babies, but just anything that changes your life, something that happens, something that is created, is now there. It could be a responsibility or a task. But with death, the thing that is suddenly there, right in our faces, is lack. And lack is not commonly spoken about as a thing, but something that O.G. Rose speak about a lot. Daniel Garner being one of the two of them. Lack is not absence, just pure absence of something. It's a third category. There are things that definitely are complete absence of things, which means also absence of thoughts about them. And then there is lack, which is a severely felt presence of something's absence. And this is something that we can get into when we begin inquiring about death. And it's something that is very fundamental to our nature. Lack. So it very deeply resonates with something, perhaps uncomfortably so. It may be something you don't want to feel resonate. Which makes it all the more interesting.